So it's truly an honor to welcome you to this Press Club event as we mark International Women's Week 2026. This year's International Women's Day, the theme was Give to Gain. It's a powerful reminder that when we invest in others, when we create opportunities, share resources, and open doors, the benefits extend far beyond individuals. Families thrive, communities grow stronger, and entire economies flourish. And nowhere is this spirit of giving so that others may gain more visible than in the work of women in agriculture. Today's Press Club's theme, Women Cultivating Opportunity, Advancing Rights, Justice and Action for Women, Farmers and Agripreneurs in Kenya, speaks directly to this reality. Across Kenya, women farmers and agripreneurs give so much every single day. They cultivate the land, feed families, sustain local markets, and support entire value chains. Through their work, they are not only providing food, they are creating opportunities, supporting livelihoods, and strengthening communities. Yet, despite this immense contribution, many of these women continue to face barriers when it comes to land ownership, access to credit, modern farming technologies, and markets. Addressing these challenges is therefore not just an economic issue. It is a matter of rights, justice, and action, which is exactly what today's conversation is about. And when I reflect on the spirit of give to gain and the incredible role women play in our food system and communities, my thoughts immediately go to my late mother. From the time I was growing up until the day she passed on, I rarely had to buy food. My mother made sure of that. She would send farm produce to me through the newspaper van, sometimes through a matatu, and sometimes she would bring it herself. And whenever we visited her, my car would always leave heavier than it arrived, filled with food. Anyone who interacted with my mother remembers her for one thing: she loved feeding people. Every Monday and Friday, she would wake up very early to be among the first people at the main market in Meru to buy farm produce. Rain, cold, or sunshine, it did not matter. She was always there. Through that small business, she sacrificed so much. She put food on the table, supported farmers by buying their produce, educated her children, us, and fed many people around her. At some point, she developed arthritis, and I told her, "Mom, let me open a shop for you so that you can sell your products more comfortably." But she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "Thank you for that, but I love and enjoy being at the kibanda because this is where I interact with people, I engage them, and it was more personal for her." And she said that that's where she will be until the end of time. And indeed, that is where her story ended. In November 2022, she collapsed and passed away right there at her kibanda. When I reflect on her life, I see a woman who truly embodied the spirit of giving so that others could gain. She gave to her family. She gave to the farmers she supported by buying their produce. And she gave to the many people she fed along the way. And I know that across Kenya today, there are thousands of women just like my mother, quietly working, sacrificing, and feeding a nation. Her story reminds me of the countless women across Kenya, especially the women farmers and traders we are discussing today, who work quietly every day to feed families, sustain communities, and support entire value chains. They may not always appear in headlines, but their contribution is enormous. They are the backbone of our food system and our local economies. As journalists and members of the fourth estate, we play a critical role in shaping national conversations. The stories we tell influence policy debates, shape public perception, and determine whose voices are heard. Too often, the stories of women farmers and agripreneurs remain underreported. Today's event challenges us to strengthen evidence-based gender-responsive journalism. Journalism that highlights both the challenges women face and innovative solutions emerging across the country. We must ensure that the stories of women cultivating opportunity in farms, markets, cooperatives, and agri-tech spaces are told with the depth, accuracy, and visibility they deserve. As we have these discussions today about rights, justice, and action for women farmers and agripreneurs, I hope we remember the thousands of women, like my mother, whose daily sacrifices feed families, sustain communities, and support farmers across this country. Women who may never stand on a podium like this one, but whose work feeds a nation. If we truly want to honor them, then our conversations must translate into real opportunity, real support, and real action for women in agriculture. Because when we invest in women like them, we are not just supporting individuals, we are securing the future of our communities and our country. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation, and may my mom rest in peace. Enjoy the conversation.
We believe that evidence matters, and it's not only evidence about the situation, the status, what is there, the challenges, the barriers, but we believe that we need evidence on innovative solutions, on what works for advancing women economic empowerment. And once we have the evidence, we believe that is not enough. We need to share this evidence out. We need to get it to the policy space and use it to influence policy for women economic empowerment. So that is what we've been doing for the last 5 years. We generate evidence and use it to inform policy on women economic empowerment. Please allow me to appreciate the Press Club event organizers, more specifically for the opportunity accorded to me to be a part of this important conversation on women cultivating opportunity, advancing the rights, justice, and action for women farmers and agripreneurs in Kenya. This is a very important conversation as we observe this year's International Women's Day, because women economic empowerment, this is a very important and timely conversation. Now in Kenya in particular, we know that women are central to Kenya's agricultural economy. They play the vital role of agricultural production, food systems, getting involved in the whole agricultural value chain, including in trade, processing and distribution of food, and also they contribute to the livelihood in the rural areas where agricultural activity is the mainstay. In Kenya, women account for 70 to 80% of the labor force in the agricultural sector. So let us think about the agricultural sector. 70 to 80% it will be women. We are simply saying, if you get 10 people that work in the agricultural sector, 7 or 8 of them will be women. So that is quite a large proportion. And the most discouraging thing about this is good for them to be involved in those high levels. We find that they are mainly in the informal and the small scale subsistence farming. Subsistence farming is good because we know that it's the one that provides food for the family, for the household, and therefore it's good for food security. But again, we are saying, is it the informal? it's not recognized, it's not counted in the GDP. Because when we measure the size of the economy, we exclude the production and the services that are done by a household member to the benefit of another household member. So when we talk about the GDP, that 24% contribution of the agricultural sector, most of the women are not included in that contribution. So we're simply saying there are many, we know the numbers, but their contribution is not really valued as a part of the main economy. But we know it matters because that's what feeds us in the households. Again, another thing we may want to note is that women in Kenya are responsible for 60 to 80% of food production. I think we've heard about the president talk about the production that was done by the mom, and also we know even what our parents are doing, and our mothers particularly, are doing. 60 to 80% of food production in Kenya is by women. I think that is very important, and it just shows the place of women and how women matter in the agricultural sector, and the importance of their contribution to food and nutrition for good lives and healthy lives in Kenya. Now, however, there is really a gender gap or disparity when you compare the woman farmer and the male farmers. Although women account for these high numbers of 70 to 80% and they are producing 60 to 80% of food, we also know that women, they only account for 33% of formal wage employment. So we are simply saying, yes, they are there, they are many, but actually they are not paid. They are producing for subsistence and for the consumption of a household. I don't mean that is not important. It is important. But from the economic point of view, we don't count that in the GDP because we are saying when we count what the size of the economy, we don't count what is not brought in the market. And women are also mainly in the informal sector producing for subsistence, and this is good for the family as well as for the household. And we also know that Kenyan women hold less than 10% of the land titles independently, where we can say that people who hold title deeds, women account for less than 10%. But what is the importance of this? Title deed is important. That ownership is important for the control and decision making, because when somebody does not have the title deed, then they are limited in decision making, and more specifically about what to produce, where to produce, how much to produce, and even for whom to produce. And that is why they may have to remain subsistence to produce for the household, which is good, but an extra production is important for an income for the household. So decision making is limited by the fact that they do not really have the control and the ownership of land. Regarding access to credit, we find that women receive less than 10% of the available agricultural credit. So again, we are saying they need to invest in the agricultural sector, they need money, but access is limited to the woman farmer. And women also generally work longer hours compared to men. And we find that they, on average in the agricultural sector, women are working, if we consider women in the agricultural sector, they work 12.9 hours per day compared to men who work 8.2 hours per day. I think we know that even those in the formal employment, the working hours could be 8. So how does it get to 12.9? It's because of the care work and domestic work, which is important and which is done for the family. And women bear the burden of this work. It is a good thing. But again, we are saying, if you're comparing the hours they spend in the workplace, in the farm, and also the hours they spend in the household, they spend quite a lot of time as compared to men. So again, that becomes a barrier, because it talks of what we call in economics time poverty, because we're simply saying they don't have enough time to spend in their workplace, whether they are entrepreneurs in the agricultural sector, whether they are farming, because they have other roles to play in the family as caregivers, as well as taking care of the babies, for the sick, for the persons with disability, as well as for the elderly, and also for the domestic work. Another important thing we may want to talk about the women in Kenya is that given these few barriers that I've talked about, because there are many, we know that economic empowerment is very important, because in fact, given that it employs so many people, and in this case, it employs women, and therefore supporting women farmers and agripreneurs leads to increased agricultural productivity. For example, closing the gaps between men and women in accessing agricultural production resources such as land and credit can lead to an increase in yields, agricultural yields, by between 20 and 30%. So we are saying that the difference between the yields between women and men, which are existing, and then already this can be closed if we address the issue of accessing the factors of production, such as land, such as credit, and the yield would increase by 20 to 30%. And this will lead to, improved household or national food security and nutrition, greater economic resilience within communities, increased incomes at household levels and the national level at large. So women economic empowerment, especially women in agricultural sector, counts. Another thing is that when we look at this empowerment, the issue of research and innovation is key, especially to unlock the opportunities that exist. And this research needs to go beyond the status, where are we, and what are the barriers, and what are the opportunities. It needs to go beyond that, to coming up with solutions, innovative solutions, which are accessible to women farmers and which work for them to be able to increase their agricultural productivity. A lot of time spent on giving care for the children, or going to work in the market with a child. So we set one, we were piloting to study the impact of accessing that child care, first on the child nutrition, and secondly on the women economic empowerment. And we found that in a 3 years period, women that were able to access the child care, which is of high quality and which is affordable, they were able to increase the time they spent in their businesses by 12%. They were able to increase their sales by 40% and to increase their profits by 25%. And of course, they were much happier. There are things that we could not really measure, but we found that they were much happier. They are not worried whether the child is running about. They are likely to meet a motorbike speeding there when they are running in the marketplace, and that also improves their health. So what we're saying is research that informs policy. Another example is a program that we set at Women Economic Empowerment Hub. We came up with a Women Business Incubation Program, and we incubated women businesses from 12 counties in Kenya. We linked them with technology, and they were able to value add different products, and this led to the growth of their businesses. Solutions that work to improve women's economic empowerment. I have many examples to give, but let me stop at that point in the interest of time. Another thing I may want to point is that structural barriers leading to gender gaps, disproportionately and negatively impact on women, and this needs to be addressed. Now, when we talk about these structural barriers, I would like to talk first and foremost about the cultural and gender norms, which exist. The beliefs by the community and by the society that women should do this and women should not do this. This work is for women, this one is for men, and so on and so on. And that is a reality, and we know it. And in this case, we find that it's necessary to address this. because if we address these cultural norms and also gender norms, it will strengthen women's participation in the economy, and it will bring more income to the household, and that is good for economic development. Another important thing in addressing the barriers is to strengthen women's land and inheritance rights. I do know that if we look at the Constitution of Kenya 2010, there is provision that guarantees women equal rights to land ownership and inheritance. But we know for sure this is not being enforced. In some places it is working, but we are a long way to go. Mainly because, again, of cultural norms and what the society believes, and so on and so on. But the point here is we need to address, we need to enforce those professions so that women are able to inherit land, they can own land, they'll be able to make the right decisions on what to produce and how to produce and what quantities and at what place, and even for what market to produce for whom. Another important thing in addressing the barriers, it is important to expand access to affordable finance and markets. We know credit is there, banks are there, but most of the times they are not reachable by women, they are not accessible. The high interest rate, the requirements of collateral and so on are a big challenge to the women. So I would suggest, a situation where we have development of financial products and services that are suitable to women. For example, including those ones that can lend to women collectives, because that way women collectives are able to provide that guarantee as a group, and therefore women will be able to access credit to invest in the agricultural sector. Another, recommendation that we can consider is to promote gender-responsive agricultural policies and programs, and more specifically, we need programs that address specific needs and roles and constraints of women and men to reduce inequalities and enhance productivity. When I talk about this, for example, I've given an example of a child care center. We know that women are the ones really that take care for the small babies below 4 years who are not yet going to the school system. So such things lead to addressing barriers. Women will spend more time in the workplace, in their businesses, and that is good. And even in the farm, because they know that the child is in a safe place and is taken care of. And also, another example when it comes to technology is we need technologies that are friendly to women and which are affordable, and where women can be able to use them and to afford them and use them, including use of improved seeds which lead to better yields. Also, participation of women in leadership is very important so that they can make decisions concerning things that concern them regarding the environment and agricultural production and marketing. And of course, investing and promoting collection and use of gender disaggregated data, because this is important in the use of decisions, especially regarding programming in the agricultural sector, in government interventions, as well as guiding investment decisions. And finally, I would like to say that partnerships for women economic empowerment in agricultural sector are very essential. I would give examples of partnerships that the Women Economic Empowerment Hub has had with the private sector, with the banks, with KILD, with Kenya Industrial Estates, and many other partners in the civil society. We've worked in partnership, and we have seen that partnerships for we is very critical, because each one of us has a role to play, and when we play that role and put it together, we pull together in the same direction and we are able to achieve a lot. So partnerships key. And in conclusion, Kenya's agricultural transformation depends on unlocking the full potential of women in agriculture, strengthening collaboration between research institutions, policymakers, and grassroots actors will be key to advancing the rights, justice, and the opportunity for women farmers and agripreneurs in Kenya. I want to thank you very much for being very attentive. Thank you. Sorry.
Let's applaud Prof. Mo. Hey, hii makofi ya leo ni ya kuuza, ni ya kiuzo. Tupige makofi. That is knowledge that you'll be paying for at the university once you go to the WE hub. I like what Professor there said, that Kenya's economic transformation will only be hinged on what we call full empowerment of the woman. Unless the women are empowered, then we are talking and just talking and not doing anything. But a few statistics that were really startling, that 70 to 80% of women form the labor force. 70 to 80%. But again, they are largely in the informal and subsistence sector. 60 to 80% of our food needs are met by women. That is very high. That means men are largely eaters. We are looking at a gender gap. But when it comes to benefits, only 33% are in the employment sector. The eaters take more in terms of gaining. Yet, we are talking about things like access to land and credit is only 10%. They produce more, and access to credit it's only 10%. They work for longer hours. I think profit could be longer, because even when they are going to sleep, they still work. They're thinking. Maybe they work for 18 to 23 hours in a day. 12.9 hours per day. The man works for 8.2 hours. Those are very startling statistics. When it comes to who has access to credit, who has access to the title, the decision making, the man takes everything else. The woman stays in the back. Times that we heap on women. Those are figures to digest. And I think for us, Kenya cannot be anything, society, family cannot be anything without women. And our next speaker is Dr. Lucy Wakiaga, an associate research scientist at African Population and Health Research Center. And this, she will definitely deal with what we call land ownership gaps, finance disparity, digital exclusion, economic cost of inequality. Welcome. Let's welcome her in the club.
I watch you so much on TV. So I was giddy like a little girl when I saw them. There's some things made up. I'll make sure I take a photo with you just to brag to my family that I know people. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lucy Wakiaga. I'm from the African Population and Health Research Center. I'm in the Human Development team. And I'm here to talk about our topic today and focusing on the aspects of gender because I'm a gender lead at APHRC. Now, I must confess, when Prof was talking, and those of us who come from the academia, we always defer to our seniors. when she started talking, I was like, maybe I should just fold my laptop and go back to the office, because she clearly said everything, and that's what professors do. So now it's a very tough act to follow. A lot of what she has talked about, you will see them in my slide. But because I took an Uber na nimetumia pesa ya ofisi kufika hapa, so please just accord me the opportunity to share my slides, even if they are a repeat, please. I am confessing in advance. So just a brief introduction about our organization. We are a research organization. We consider ourselves a fearless research organization in Africa. We do research for Africa. We are African-led. We have 2 campuses, one in Nairobi and one in Dakar, Senegal. And what we do is similar to also what Prof does and the organization and the University of Nairobi, generating evidence so that that evidence does not sit on the shelf, but rather it is able to make impact, moving policy to action. Now, I'm sharing our vision there as well as our values, because I think it really informs the discussion that we have here. So what we envision as APHRC and what we push for is to transform lives in Africa through research. And that is very key, because of course we want to be able to be in that space where decisions are being made, and oftentimes we find that our voices are really missing from the conversation. And if we don't conduct research ourselves as Africans, someone else is going to conduct that research for us, and we definitely know how that will disadvantage us. So one of our values there is on fairness, and in the aspect of fairness, we talk about equity and inclusion, and that is the conversation that we are having today, to make sure that everything that we do really brings about equality within society, and especially in the African society. So as I had confessed earlier on, I'm beginning my cheat sheet to indicate some of what you have already had before. So when you look at those numbers, and they have been shared already, we find that when we look at contribution of women, 42 to 65% comes from the women in the labor force. And just allow me to share a little bit more about that. Just get on to my notes. So when you look at these numbers and you look at contributions of women, and noting that especially in the rural areas, women make up around 75% of the labor, which had already been mentioned. These statistics mirror even statistics around the globe when you look at developing countries, and the huge percentage that women put into producing food. 60 to 8% of food crops coming from the women. So when you look at these staggering numbers, it's already an indication that the institutional systems are already gendered. They are not balanced. So whether you are talking about land, which Prof talked about earlier, when you look at financing, issues of financing, and education systems, and I hope there will be an opportunity for us even to have a conversation around our education system and how that really impacts women in agriculture. So all these affect, when you have these gendered institutional systems, we know that they affect resources and also opportunity. So we see that the issue is not participation. Women are participating. Rather, the issue is the structural inequality within these agricultural systems. So when we look at the issue of inequality, and maybe if I can tease out a little more the issue of land ownership, we see that 75 to 93% of this agricultural land, as well as the non-agricultural land, is not in the ownership of the women. They don't own it. And when you go to smallholder farmers, 80% are women, and yet when you look at land ownership, they don't have a grasp of it. And then another startling statistic is that 70% of women do not own any kind of land, okay? And also, Prof. had talked earlier about the issue of culture and how that really influences the ability or the opportunities for women to be able to own land. So, of course, we know the impact of this. So when you have gender equality in land ownership, then you see that this is an indication that there is a disconnect between policy commitments and implementation. We have laws that allow women to get these opportunities. However, when you come to implementation, we see that this is not the case. Now, land is actually a right. It is an economic asset. It is a fundamental right, and very important in terms of shaping access to finance, access to technology, and access to decision making. So we know that if these opportunities are denied to women, then definitely they are not able to effectively engage in agriculture. Then the other thing, when you look at the issues of finance, when you look at financial inclusion, so we see challenges with women in terms of the systemic constraints, accessing agricultural credit, inability or lack of opportunity to get access to productive inputs and technologies, as well as extension services. And these extension services, we're actually talking about formal professional extension services. So these gendered financial systems, we see them really becoming a disadvantage to the women. So when we find that these opportunities are denied to the women, they are not able to effectively get into high value markets and innovation systems. And as the conversation has been going on around here, if, as Ken said, that women probably work up to 23 or 24 hours, of course I'm sure there's a time that they do go to sleep. I mean, they have to go to bed. But of course, what we are basically saying is that they are very occupied with economic activities, yet they are not the ones who actually are in control of the resources. Then we know that we are disadvantaging women. Maybe if I can just digress a little bit, there are stories. I come from an area where we eat fish, okay? And so Ken, I'm not talking Kiswahili. I'll try to avoid that. But I come from a community where we eat fish, but I hear stories of, for example, those who come from the tea areas, those who come from the coffee areas, and probably it could be the same even for those who engage in other commodities, maybe like sugarcane and so on, whereby the woman will toil in the farm, and then when the crops are harvested and disaggregated and taken to the collection points for sale, whose name is on the check? And I shall stop there. Okay. So when we think about how women are disadvantaged, clearly we can see that the numbers are there and the numbers speak for themselves. So this is probably my because I'm in education. So looking at that nexus between education and agricultural empowerment, when we have education inequality, then definitely we are going to have disparities in economic opportunities and leadership representation. That one is a given. Because if you have inequality, it means already, when you have educational inequality, it means already both genders are not starting from the same starting point. One person is already ahead of the other. And I think I was asked to talk a little bit about the educational aspects, and I don't know if there'll be some further engagements on that. But there's been some studies we have conducted at APHRC looking at even in the classroom itself. When you look at the classroom, there was a research we did last year, 2024 to 2025, that was looking at the nexus between gender, pedagogy, and STEM in undergraduate programs in universities. And it was very interesting to see the kinds of conversations that were coming out of that study, whereby you find that when you look at STEM classrooms, you'll find that the young women are the ones who are matriculating less at a slower speed compared to the men. That is one. Their dropout rates are quite high compared to the men. And when they engage, even within the classroom, you'll find that there's a lot of stereotyping, there's a lot of bias, there's a lot of condescending language, even within the learning environment, from the lecturers themselves as well as fellow students. And even when they are conducting experiments, you find that the males are the ones who are going to be in the middle of conducting the actual experiment. But what do the females do? They are the ones washing the beakers, they are the ones washing the pipettes, they are the ones who are standing on the sidelines. So even from that very level, you find that there's already bias and stereotyping that really inhibit the young women from expanding and pursuing their STEM courses effectively. So then what does this mean then for the careers of women in STEM? And we know agriculture and STEM are actually interconnected, and Prof had even had a conversation, or she mentioned something about issues of technologies. So the impact of this is we find statistics telling us that we only have 30% of scientists who are women. And the numbers are not only within Kenya, but then even globally. We find that only 30% of scientists are women. So when we have inequalities in education, it definitely has an impact on economic development. So when we come back to our discussion here on issues of agriculture and education, we are able to see that this education inequality reduces access to agricultural extension services. There's less participation of the women, especially in the cooperatives. And once again, let me digress. There is this story that was being shared about some farming activity that was happening in the coastal region. And the women had actually put money together in a cooperative, and it was running, I think, into millions. And then, we say he, she, isn't it? He, she, he, because we want everybody to be part of the conversation, isn't it? Am I talking to myself?
No, you're talking.
I'm talking, okay. So what happened here is that the men started complaining. They said, oh, we are not included. The women are the ones who are benefiting from this initiative. It was a farming initiative at the coast. And so the women decided, okay, because of the he, she, he, let us do what? Let us allow the men to come in. And within a very short time, that cooperative had disintegrated. Money had disappeared, and the project had come to a halt. So really we see that when we talk about this whole issue of participation of the women, we have to make sure that it is in such a way that we empower not only the women but also the men to be able to have leadership structures that can empower them in their activity. Then there is also limited access to digital agriculture and financial technologies. And I've already talked about when you look at the education system and the kinds of disadvantages, especially in the areas of STEM, and how that continues to impact the graduates even when they get out of the universities and actually engage into these areas of agriculture. So, what is the development cost of gender inequality? And I put the inequality, the in parentheses, so as to look at both sides of the divide. So, when we look at the inequality aspect, inequality is systemic inefficiency in development systems. And this is more so especially in terms of policy implementation. And so if you have ineffective policy implementation, then this has a multiplier effect in terms of affecting agricultural productivity as well as food security. And that then trickles down to the very low levels in terms of when you think about the household. You have reduced household income, there is lower yields, and then also at the macro level, then you have weaker agricultural value chains. And we know how that has an impact on the women, especially as we have already said, they don't really have a strong control of the value chain. So, on the other side, if we are talking about the development cost of gender equality, how does that look like? According to the FAO, it says that women, when they are empowered, especially the small-scale farmers, then they are able to raise the global income of 58 million people. That is a global statistic. I don't know how it would look like at the Kenyan level. Maybe, Prof, you might be able to enlighten us on that. And then closing the gender productivity gaps is estimated to yield production gains. And this was for a case study that was done in Nigeria, Tanzania, and Uganda. And they found that when you close that gender productivity gap, then the production gains that are experienced are almost like 2.8%, as was in the case of the research that was conducted in Nigeria, 8.1 in Tanzania, 10.3 in Uganda. So actually the development cost can be, it's something tangible, it's something that can be calculated, it is something that can be determined. And then also, when there's emphasis on equality, then the monthly consumption is also expected to increase. And according to that research that was done, like 2.9% in Nigeria, 1.4% in Tanzania, and 10.7% in Uganda. So we propose, or we can kind of attribute or connect that this would be the same if the research was conducted in other places. So finally, what would it take to transform agricultural systems? What would it take? Number one big aspect would be dismantling socio-cultural norms, and Prof also talked about this. Re-examining women's land rights. Already the law is there, so I think the journey or the task for us is to make sure that the law is fully implemented. And usually when you talk about implementation, you also have to have accountability measures. So what would be the other side of it if communities, if families don't comply? There has to be a compliance mechanism. So I think that's probably one of the areas that we have a challenge. Gender responsive agricultural finance. These financial institutions, when they say they are supporting women, do they provide tools? Do they provide products that are that speak to the needs of the women? So looking into that. And then the other side of transforming agricultural systems is also looking at the systemic aspect. We've talked about issues of education, issues of training, digital inclusion. I remember when I was young, I know niko na Gen Z na millennials, but I'm in earlier, wazee huko. So when I say when I was, there was one time I said when we were young, and I looked around me and realized I had younger people. So in my case, I remember when we were young, we used to have extension officers who would walk around and give advice. But nowadays, that is not the case. We tend to see those who are giving advice coming from either they are seed companies or they are companies that are engaged in crop protection. What is the danger of that? And if there are those who are from those companies, I'm not trying to kill your business. I'm just trying to, for us to think a little critically of the engagements. And for me, I'm talking a little bit from experience because I used to work with with a crop protection company. So you find that when you are going to give technical advice to farmers, and you are coming from a seed company or a crop protection company, whose agenda are you going to push? It's your agenda, isn't it? So when you are giving that advice, it is a very skewed advice, because of course at the end of the day, you are looking at your bottom line. Okay? So maybe for us, and the fourth estate community is very powerful in terms of amplifying voices. It's to advocate more for bringing back the government extension officers, okay, who are really unbiased in terms of the advice and support that they were providing to the farmers. And then finally, having women in decision-making positions. I know we talk of leadership, but then leadership not only in the position of leadership, but then making sure that the women have a voice, they have agency, and they can be able to make a difference. So I'll stop there. Prof, I hope I didn't borrow too much from your cheat. My cheat sheet did not borrow too much, but I defer to you definitely because you are the expert. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Back to you, Ken.
Thank you. Let's appreciate. I identify with when we were young. so we can talk about it. I saw those ones around. They used to wear khaki clothes.
Yes.
And they were very important. Nobody would start any cultivation or planting before those guys came and measured for you the spacing. And they told you how many seeds you needed to put per hole. And that was very controlled. They told you when to mix which crops to do the legumes and the maize, and that was very important. And those two presentations have touched on very important matters. We've talking about what it means when talking about what it comes to mind is that women access land rights are about human rights. That you cannot talk about human rights and exclude women from it. You cannot talk about women and economic prosperity. We are not talking about women having access to these resources like land, a key production elements. Because we are talking about, and then you have to deal with what I like what the term called the paradox, the structural paradox. The many things that we think are placed are now against women, the customary things. I think of the widows who lose land. They may have a chance to get land, but customs and customary things dispossess these women. What are their rights? They are disinherited, and that means we compromise food security and so many other things. I like the question of education. How we always assume that people have gone to school, but that figure of 30% of women being scientists, especially when we're in the digital era, we're talking about technology and access to other systems on how we can market. Early in the morning, I was talking to my brother Peter Wakemba, Mr. Kinoti. Mr. Kinoti mentioned something very, very profound. That when you talk about the value chain the value chain starts after the farm gate. So, if the women are the ones on the farm, they never get where the food is sold. That means they're getting the short end of the stick. So they are totally locked out of the value chain process. And that's where the money begins to kick in. And so it's important. Now, our next session is we're going to invite panelists to come and put some more flesh and give us more perspectives. Those were very general remarks that were keynote, were setting the stage. Now, I want to invite to the stage here the following people, and they are going to talk specifically. We have from them, we'll start with the ladies first. Tracy Lichuma. Tracy. Welcome her. She's from FIDA. I never quite get the full meaning of FIDA. She will tell us what FIDA means. I don't know whether it's a French acronym or it doesn't quite fit. Eh? And then we have Dr. Chris Ojio from SINT. Dr. Chris. Where is Dr. Chris? I'll start with the ladies. I'll just pass on.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Tracy Vichuma. I'm an advocate for the High Court of Kenya, and I am a legal counsel at the Federation of Women Lawyers, where we assist women in accessing justice. Yes, thank you.
What is the full meaning of FIDA?
I'm not sure.
Who knows what FIDA means? What does FIDA stand for? Yes, sir. I'll allow you to say this.
So just like FIFA, this name comes from the Spanish. So it's a Spanish word that is Federación Internacional de Agripreneurs. So that is a
Say that again.
Federación Internacional de Agripreneurs, something like that. Close that year. No, abogado, not Agripreneurs. Abogado.
What's your name, sir?
Sorry, my name is Mark. I work with Tracy.
So what is the equivalent of English?
It's Federation of Women Lawyers, or International Federation of Women Lawyers, because it's an international body. Each country has a chapter. So in Kenya now we have the Federation of Women Lawyers in Kenya. There's the Federation of Women Lawyers in Nigeria, Federation of Women Lawyers in Uganda.
Thank you so much. Let's appreciate our brother here. And a bit of Spanish this morning, just like FIFA. Yes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
My name is Chris Ojio. I come from an institution that also borrows Spanish names, so I'll not try to mention what it is in Spanish, but it's CIVIT in short. I'll give you the English version, which is International Center for Maize and Wheat Improvement. And you want to know what I do there?
Yes.
Well, I'm trained as a plant breeder, developing new technologies around improved varieties. But I'm turned around into seed system specialist right now, more or less moving the technologies out of the shells into the farmer's fields. At CIVIT, that's what my substantive role is. I have additional roles around Africa and within Kenya. I am an adjunct professor at JUST, western part of Kenya, and also I chair the Africa Center for Technical Partnership Platform with Africa Union. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, how we look at it is that without rights, you cannot have access and you cannot have an action plan. So if we are, as Kenyans, we are all right holders. So in terms of land, for you to be a right holder, you need to have the name on your title. And in most cases, as we have seen, women are not allowed to have their names on the titles, meaning they are unable to access that right as a landholder. Now, the status of women holding rights or holding rights to land are very few. It's like 3%, meaning most of the time it's men who are in the names of the title. This is from a patriarchal society where men are the ones who hold all the land, especially in the rural areas. Now, in terms of agriculture, we have seen most of the women either undergoing sexual harassment, especially in the tea farms, and they don't have a reporting mechanism, which becomes a challenge. So those are among the cases that us at FIDA, we get to handle. Other than the agricultural side, we have issues of matrimonial property, issues of succession, where most of the time, once the owner of the land passes on, then the woman is disinherited or is left destitute by the in-laws, which is more common in the cases that we handle. So most of the times, the women who come to access justice in the office is either they have been removed from the property that they have known or they have tilled for over 40 years, and once their husband dies, then the in-laws take over and they leave the widow destitute. In terms of matrimonial property, the issue comes in about where right now, from 2014, everyone is supposed to register their marriages. Be it customary, be it Christian or Islamic, you need to register your marriage. Most of the times we've seen women in the rural sector especially, they have never registered their marriages. They've just been living with their husband for over 40 years. Now, in matrimonial court, that becomes a challenge because if you do not dissolve the marriage, then you're unable to actually access the rights of the land in the matrimonial court. Meaning, you have to go through the divorce process first, and if you don't have a marriage certificate, then that becomes a challenge in going to acquire your interest in the matrimonial court. So the other challenge is that there's normally intermeddling by the in-laws. When someone dies, you have to go through the court process for you to be able to access the rights of the land. Intermeddling comes in when that does not happen and the people or the in-laws or the relatives intermeddle either by wanting to change the title of the land, wanting to remove you from the land, and that becomes a challenge. So statistically, most of the cases that we handle at FIDA, which are almost 80%, involve the removal of the widow from the land, the succession issue, and sexual harassment in the tea farms and the tea zones that take place even currently.
Thank you so much. So, is short you saying once the people have been excluded from land, then the discussion about them being farmers ends there. Then they cannot do that. So FIDA is likely you deal with the people who are who have been dispossessed or not denied access. And invariably, if you've been denied access, then access to other farming systems come in. Dr. Gio, you are a research scientist and you deal with the food systems in terms of what seed qualities that the seed that gets available to women and the farmers, and particularly women, improvement of seeds and quality that also has impact on what we call production and output. So what is your experience at SIMT?
Thank you very much. Let me start by giving you a few stories from outside Kenya, and then I'll bring it down to Kenya. We were in Tanzania last week looking at bean variety. There's a variety that has been developed particularly for being easy to cook, fast cooking. While gathering men and women, we were hammering the point, this is a good variety, it's good for women, it saves energy, it saves the time. You don't have to spend a lot of money buying charcoal to cook it. And the men that are there told us, wait a minute, this variety is not just a women variety, it's also our variety. Why? Because when the charcoal is exhausted, the women will come and ask for money to buy more charcoal. So it's not just theirs, it's ours too. Oh, it's low in fertilizer, it cooks fast. Yes, it's their variety, we appreciate. But you know what? When it takes too long to cook, the person who complains is a man. I'm trying to put this perspective to say that sometimes we are attacking the problem most likely from the wrong perspectives and assuming that the problem is the women. I think women are not the problem. Many times men are the problem. And I think unless we address men as a problem, then we will continue to remain under that problem because we didn't address the challenges of men. I'll give you another example from vegetables. Again, some time back, this is more than a decade ago, a scientist from South Africa makes a presentation of vegetables and say, vegetables and fruits, you need to have 5 a day, 5 a day. If you don't have 5 a day, you don't have enough. And the best entry point are the women because they're the ones who cook for the family. Then a woman raises her hand in the middle and says, I think you've got the point wrong this time around. I'm a woman and I'm here to tell you you're not addressing the problem. We are not the problem are the men. Then everyone was shocked. That should have been coming from someone else. And so we asked, so how is the problem the men? The problem is the man because if I cook for my husband and he doesn't eat the vegetables, my children think the father is a hero, and if the father is a hero and he thinks vegetables are bad for the family, then the whole family feels that it's not good for the family. So the whole family doesn't eat the vegetables. How am I going to be the entry point when the bad person, the person who doesn't appreciate the vegetable is the man? So sometimes the entry point, the challenge is the men. So working on the hearts of men to grow. So if you try to push or to pump more pressure in a balloon and put a stone on top of the balloon, what happens? The balloon bursts. So remove the stone if you want the balloon to grow. I think the stone in some places the men. Well, sorry for the men because I'm a man, but don't worry. I'm putting this in perspective because I know many times when we're addressing women issues, we ignore men issues. And I think sometimes addressing men issues become critical for women to be empowered. If you address the men issues, the women sometimes get almost automatically empowered because you address the challenge, you address the stone that was sitting on the balloon that you pressed. Now in terms of technology access, the challenge has been for many years that there are crops that we are, again I talk back to the crops we address as men crops and women crops, legumes mostly being assumed to be women crops. People think that men are not interested in legumes. And so we propagate this idea that legumes, the bean family are women crops. And it turns out that men are as interested as women when especially it becomes a commercial crop. So for as long as it's a local food security household subsistence crop is a woman's crop. But then when we make all these diversities available, where we have new varieties available, farmers also have their old varieties available, then there is a choice. You can choose to use your old variety, and you can also choose to use a new variety. Many times, new varieties are developed for particular purposes. They're supposed to be either resistant to a particular disease or resilient to drought or early maturity, and I think I mentioned something like fast cooking, sometimes with some tastes and preferences that are addressed. The bulk of it are about agronomic practices around pest and disease resistance and around drought and perhaps heat tolerance. And that takes the productivity higher than the traditional varieties. Opportunity starts with equal opportunity when the end use is subsistence. The moment the end use changes to commercial and money earning, sometimes interests begin to change, and sometimes men begin to come in and start to edge women around and say, here is where we want to have money. Somebody mentioned earlier, I think the second speaker, about farm gate. Value chain begins after the farm gate. And the bulk of what the women earn is at farm gate. But then I was talking to one of our founders recently, and he made a statement that I usually like repeating. He says the best way to make a very small fortune is to make a very big fortune and then invest it in agriculture. And I was like, what did you say? Make a big fortune, invest in agriculture is the best way to make a small fortune. Yes, because The people who make a big fortune in agriculture are not the farmers. It is the people who operate after the farm gate. So the farm gate prices are normally very low. But then the intervening actions after the farm gate, the prices go skyrocketing. And so the farmers get the lowest fortunes, but the people who act after the farmers, the aggregators, the traders, the processors, get very low prices. How do we get this to change? Is by getting farmers, and particularly in this case women farmers, to not just be farm gate sellers, but people who can be engaged in the rest of the stages of the value chains, including microprocessing.
Yeah. While you still have the mic, there is this element that you in the development of the seed systems and improving them and giving them higher value in returns. There's the big element about patterning, which is something that could lock out a lot of farmers, especially women. How do you deal with it in terms of allowing access?
In Kenya, I don't think we have significant challenges of patent laws. At the moment, the variety release process goes this way. Most of the public sector variety development is done by international agricultural institutions like CIMIT, among others. There are about 15 of them in what we call the Consultative International Agricultural Research Centers, CGIR. And then they work with national programs like CALRO. In this particular case, I could pick for Kenya. The person who registers the variety is not the international institution. The variety is registered in Kenya in the name of CALRO, even if the first cross was not made by CALRO. The registration is made by CALRO, the ownership is in CALRO. The next step CALRO does is work with value chain actors to create awareness of this new variety and make it available. The point at which the only person who earns money out of this is CALRO is when it is licensed to a private seed company.
To seek help from offices that when they face challenges. So it's not just the older women who are given awareness, but it's also the young generation are also given awareness. They are part of the legal awareness that undertakes in the different parts of the country that we hold the legal awareness.
Do you, now borrowing from the Travelgero's thing, removing the stone from the balloon, how far do you involve them in removing the stone?
I'll get back to the question.
The stone was supposed to be the man.
Yes.
Putting pressure on the balloon in the woman.
Yes.
In your awareness programs and other action plans, do you have programs that specifically target removing the stone from the balloon?
So we try and involve both parties, and sometimes men become allies in this journey. So we can't completely remove the men from the conversation because they need to be aware of this, what is happening. For example, where they say daughters cannot inherit from their fathers,